You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
Hello, everyone. We're back with episode 2 of 30 Minutes to Get Back, the podcast that covers the Peter Jackson documentary, where Get Back, where the Beatles tried to record an album, make a making of television show, and plan a live concert. My name is Chris, and as always, I'm here with AJ. Hello, AJ. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing quite well. I feel happy to talk about the Beatles with you. After work, I met with some people and I went into the restroom and they were playing Band on the Run. And I was just like, man, this makes me feel really happy and I'm ready to talk some Beatles songs.
You can't beat good bathroom music. You can't.
Yeah.
Well, last episode, we discussed everything up until about the end of day 1. So today, I think we're going to cover day 2. And when we get into day 2, you can tell right away that they're kind of feeling the time crunch with the schedule because they decide to break out a bunch of older songs to try and do a little jam session and try to see if any of it sticks so that they can maybe mine some of that old unreleased material for this album. They start out right with Ringo just playing the guitar because I think they're waiting for John to show up, or he's playing the piano, not the guitar, and he's
on the piano.
Yeah, he's playing that Taking a Trip to Carolina, which I looked into and I couldn't find any other info on it, so I don't think it really turns into anything. And then John shows up, and then they play a number of very old songs. What did you think about their idea to try and mine some of that old material?
So what's interesting is, I think, before we saw this documentary, we all knew they had this remit or whatever of, it's going to be all new songs, no studio tricks, here we go. But I don't think that's in the contract or that they have commercials saying this is what it's going to be, but these are like hard, fast rules they made for themselves. So it was almost like, hey, we could pull some old things out, like that could be a cheat. And it's like, no, you can just do whatever you want, because you got to remember, they hadn't toured in a long time. So if they performed something on the White Album, that would be the first time we heard that live performed. If they did something on Magical Mystery Tour, okay, cool, because we never seen them perform those live. So it's all kosher. I don't know why it seemed like, we're in trouble now. I think if they would have gone on the air and played things from the White Album and prior, everybody would have been fine. So, but I do like the idea. I just think it's adorable. It's like, hey, when we were teenagers, we would write these songs, and it makes me appreciate One After 909 so much because it's, hey, we're teenagers, but we're kind of doing like these kind of bluesy things, like we're these older men or something, because that's kind of how you do rock and roll. So you would have to do something like that. And I just like the fact that's where their minds were as teenagers. And when they perform it later as men, it really doesn't seem that odd. It seems like, yeah, I guess you guys would do something like this right now.
It seemed like they had some fun because they found the lyrics that they had originally written as teenagers to be a little silly, but they still sort of enjoyed it because it felt like they were getting a laugh out of some of the lines to the song.
I love that they were sitting there doing that, where like, okay, we performed this, when we were younger, because they were able to just play it right off. So they still remembered it. And it was like, wait a minute, I've never really thought about these lyrics. So, okay, what's the plot again? They show up at the train station. They're late. They're not on the 909. They're looking for the one after 9. Like, I like that they were sitting there going like, wait a minute, what's the plot again?
Right, yeah. And they did. They had almost total recall. They played about a half a dozen songs, all of them written for 1960, all of them sounding like kind of old school rock and roll, Chuck Berry, Paul Perkins kind of stuff. And I took a couple of notes just to explore some of those songs, and they did Just Fun, which the only thing I see is that Paul broke that out again in 2020 on a BBC special that was celebrating John's 80th birthday. They did a song called Because I Know You Love Me So, which got released on the Fly on the Wall bonus disc that came with the copies of Let It Be Naked. They did Thinking of Linking, which sounded a little bit to me, the opening, like the John Lennon song Woman, which was on Double Fantasy in 1980. They did Won't You Please Say Goodbye, which I didn't have a lot of information on. I couldn't find anything on about that. And then One After 909, which actually made the album. And those songs kind of reminded me of something that I remember from a previous documentary I had seen where people were talking about the state of rock and roll in America and how it seemed like in the late 50s, early 60s, it was dying. That Elvis was in the army and making movies. Uh, Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis were in trouble with the law. Little Richard was, I think, getting into religion. So on the radio, you were getting like Bobby Darin and Perry Como. And in Britain, they're playing all of these old, kind of rebellious rock and roll songs. So when the British invasion happens in America, it's almost like they rejuvenate rock and roll and reintroduce the music that America introduced to them. So it was interesting to hear all of these songs and hear the style that they were playing and just remembering how much impact they had bringing rock and roll back to America.
I love that. Yeah, very interesting. It's like the aliens, they're getting those signals just now, so that they're just starting to watch I Love Lucy.
Right, right. They'll come back and they'll tell us how to actually make sitcoms.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did any of those songs, except for One After 909 or anything like that, strike anything with you, or were you just kind of enjoying the moment?
I was just enjoying the moment, and something that's interesting, I keep thinking about, wow, all right, we're getting to 1968, 1969, 1970, and the Beatles, they're getting very heavy and muddy and like Delta bluesy. Mm-hmm. And because they're just now, the White Album, I guess, is pretty stripped down and straightforward. And then they were doing some psychedelic stuff with Magical Mystery Tour. So it's interesting that they're kind of ending on where they begun, but just even more sophistication, even more, So yeah, some extra texture to reference a George Harrison solo album. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I find it fun that, again, they're like, okay, we came up with this idea. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It's like, whoa, it's January. We're cold. How can we warm up? And it's like, let's revert back to like what got us into this in the first place.
And they looked like they were having fun playing these songs and rediscovering them, playing together. They just looked like they were having a great time.
Something that's interesting about this, they're having this conversation, and George Harrison, because before this, he was in San Francisco. He was in the States. So they're like, hey, how can we get an 8-track? And George Harrison says, hey, in America, you can just go, hey, I want this. Boom, it's there the next day. Or I think Lindsey Hogg, they said, well, the Beach Boys have this. And they're in America. So it's because now it's like a person can think, I want this. You order it, boom, it's there. And there are places where things are open 24 hours all the time, where there is not like, hey, we're the Beatles. So we have clout, we have power, we have influence, but we still can't just go, I want this, boom, it could be here. Because we might live somewhere where it is not manufactured like that here, or we can't get it shipped here. So it's kind of interesting that, like, yeah, this is still 1967, because even when we were in 1985, we may have thought like, wow, I really would like a He-Man shirt, but it's not being mass produced like that.
Right, right.
Where now you can get anything anywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it seems they keep getting pulled back into trying to modernize what they're doing, even though they're trying to go back to basics because of all the equipment that's now available to them. Maybe when they were doing these songs wasn't available at all. So it is interesting to see that kind of, I don't know, the dichotomy between the modern technology of the time and the old style songs that they were doing.
Yeah, it makes me think of of two things. Eddie Izzard, the comedian, he goes like, in America, you go like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be this. It's like, sure, go for it, kid. And then it's like, when you're in Britain, you're like, I want to be an astronaut. Scale it down, you're British. I want to be scale it down, you're British. And, when you're looking at in the thick of it, it's a political show, and it's about like just kind of just the local politics in the area. And then the American version, Veep, I'm the vice president. And the plots are huge. And even with the Beatles, it's still like, hey, we're going to film this thing in the barn. We kind of, and like, we're the Beatles, right? But they might kick us out to do this, the Magical Christian. Like, we're going to rush the Beatles and kick them out? Like, what? So, yeah, again, it blows my mind. Like, they're the Beatles and they're still up against it.
And it's interesting, too, because they're doing this kind of 3-chord rock and roll songs, and their plans are so ambitious for what it's going to turn into. So it's interesting, and they're on the time crunch. So, all of that kind of juxtaposition of everything that's going on in this moment is really an interesting kind of almost microcosm of the entire event.
Wow. Yeah.
Because you feel like they just want to make music, but all this craziness is going on around them.
If we record this on 8-track, where will we get it? I mean, someone said that. Like, where will we get it? There's not just a Radio Shack around the corner? No.
So after this little jam session, it seems like they goof off a little bit more. I don't know if it was lunch, but they're doing like a weird version of Obla Di Obla Da. They do a cover of Midnight Special. And there's even a bit where John is playing the Harry Lime theme from the Third Man film.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Which is amazing to hear, because you realize these guys are musicians. They're not just, songwriters. They're not just sitting in the studio hitting buttons and doing distortion and feedback. I mean, these guys are musicians. They love music, all kinds of music. And sure, they're going to do the Harry Lime theme, because it's a fun song for them to play.
And I like this whole idea of, it's not like, hey, I can't just turn this on. Like, all right, you showed up at 8, perform for me. And it's like, no, I got to kind of like get into it. I got to like find a groove. I got to kind of mess around, and then we can get started. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about them, okay, so this documentary is because like as I'm a kid, as I'm listening to the Beatles, I'm thinking like, okay, the White Album and Let It Be Abbey Road, like there's a lot of space between it. They are steady referencing the White Album like it just happened. So I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. So when they broke into Obla Di Obla Da, I was surprised by that because, from what I've read, John Lennon hated it, and they did it like 30 times in a row. And the performance we get where Paul McCartney messes up and goes, Desmond goes home and does his pretty face. And at the end, Paul McCartney's like, oh, we got to do it over. I said, Desmond goes home and does his pretty face. They're going to think he's a cross-dresser. John, no, it's enough. That's great. It's great. It's funny. We're going to keep it. We're not doing this again. So it's surprising that, now when they were performing it, they were being mocking of it, or John Lennon was, but I found that very interesting that that's what they performed, just to kind of warm up and mess around.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess
it is a fun kind of mess around warm up song, though, if you think about it.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter really if you kind of get it right, because it's just a silly song to do.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of fun, and right around that time, that's when George gets shocked by the microphone. And it was so strange to me because he's playing with the equipment, and it's almost like, it made me think of The Shining, where the building is alive and, the building is a ghost. And I felt like where they're recording is reminding them, like, you're not supposed to be having fun. This isn't 1958. This is a cold studio that you're not comfortable in, and we're going to bring you back to reality. Because that's just what it felt like to me. Like, there's this pull of the modern day, letting them know that, you can't mask all of the problems, I guess, that the band was having during the White Album recordings. And it's almost like brings them back to reality where, yeah, that's right. The equipment kind of isn't great. And this area where we're recording doesn't always sound great. And we got cameras everywhere. And I was having fun, but now I'm not having fun anymore.
Yeah. But boy, is that backdrop beautiful.
It is. It is.
Good Lord.
And then they get back to work on a couple of songs that I guess they really figured are going to be on the album, which is I've Got a Feeling and Don't Let Me Down. And both of those are obviously great songs, but they're really working on those two.
Now, the two of us, we talked about like how much we adore Don't Let Me Down. I have to say, I want to go to Earth 2 where the call and responses are in there.
Yeah.
I freaking love it.
Those were, yeah. Don't Let Me Down is really one of like my top 10 all-time songs of anybody. It's just such a perfect rock song. It's one of those songs I never want to have end. Just keep going. Give me more verses. Just keep going. And I've Got a Feeling was a song I had to warm up to when I heard it the first time, but I love Beatles songs where they stitch together a John part and Paul part, and they make a song out of that. And it almost feels like these shouldn't fit together, but it's peanut butter and chocolate. It just mixes real well.
And that's what I love about this documentary is I romanticize like collaboration. And, these two, when they're kids, they're like, hey, let's shake hands and we're going to promise that we're going to always be Lennon McCartney, like, I forget, Hammerstein and
Rogers.
Yes, where they're like, yeah, let's be them.
Right.
So the fact that those two are doing that where they're dueling mics, I love that. And I don't know if we were seeing John Lennon kind of concocting some of the lyrics on the spot, but he was like, hair down. Socks up. And I love like opposites when you do that stuff. So I got a feeling as we go on, like they're kind of like, okay, we're just doing I Got a Feeling. But then as we move on, like things are going to happen. And then they're going to be like, wait a minute, I think I just found like the truth to what this song is. So that's going to be fun as we go forward. And then them doing Don't Let Me Down. And he's like, I'm in love for the first time. And they're going, I'm in love for the first time. I just freaking love that. And it's kind of interesting. George Harrison is like, oh, this just sounds like the same old stuff. And I'm just kind of thinking, don't say that. This song is beautiful. So if you're watching this, guys, John Lennon seems very like kind of out of it and poignant at the same time. So you're kind of seeing him watching Paul and George kind of go back and forth, and he looks concerned and worried. Where that kind of surprised me because I would have thought he would be one of the first people to like, hey, I want to get out of this.
Right.
But it seems like he's really taking everything really seriously.
Which is
now I don't know if he's stoned but he seems very earnest in this so far.
It could be foreshadowing because we do have a couple of very, big events that happen around George, later on in the documentary. So maybe his concern is warranted when he sees them, Paul and George kind of, having a conversation.
Because when we get something, John was the one to really lobby for this should be the A-side. And it's the first A-side single or only that George gets as a Beatle. So, yeah, I guess he was sticking up for his little brother. But, no, yeah, this is, it's a lot of fun. But what we're not seeing any, well, not yet, but it seems like we're not seeing John Lennon go, hey, I have this thing called Don't Let Me Down. This is how it goes. By the time we see it, they're already like, okay, we've performed this a little bit. Let's work this out. But I think later, like with Ringo, we did get hey, I got this thing. It's Carolina. Watch this. Yeah.
Which is interesting because you see that collaboration when they do two other songs, Give Me Some Truth, which ends up on Imagine in 1971, a John Lennon solo album. And when they do All Things Must Pass, which is George Harrison's song. they're working on those together. Paul is giving them ideas as they do these songs. So it's interesting to see that they're collaborating even on songs that end up, on solo albums.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing when they're performing All Things Must Pass, George is walking them through it, like, and go to E, then you go to D, and it's like, oh my, I can't believe we're witnessing this. But man, wow, I would love to hear this version too, where John Lennon's on the organ. I was like, oh, this is just so, and it kind of looked like to me, they're reading the room. George Harrison, he said, a cloud can blow those clouds away and all this stuff. And it's like, is he talking about us?
Right.
Like I'm a big Nirvana fan, and like some of the lyrics is like, man, it seems like he was crying for help almost the whole time. But you're in the band and you just kind of like, he's just saying stuff, or, this is kind of our vibe. So you're going to say things like this. Okay, keep going. And then when it happens, you're like, oh. So with All Things Must Pass, when I was younger, I just thought like, oh, okay, this is his first solo work. He's saying the Beatles must pass. But no, he is writing this thinking, and this will be on a Beatles album. So I guess if it was on a Beatles album, it would be like an era of us has passed, and now we're doing something different. Wow, just, oh my God. It gives me chills just thinking, I never thought that these four performed that together before until until I started investigating the Beatles. But now that I think about it, I don't think this is on the anthologies, them performing All Things Must Pass. I'll look into that, guys, later.
Yeah, I don't know. And it is definitely collaborative because there's a moment where John points out that because of the handwriting, one of the words, wind, looks like mind. And he kind of convinces George to change the lyric in the song, which ends up staying, where instead of saying the wind blows the clouds away, he says, my mind blows the clouds away. And it becomes a little more psychedelic.
That is gold that we saw that collaboration. Like John go, hey, do it like this, because then it can make, like the fact that we witnessed that, wow.
It's wild. And that handwriting mistake was from Mal Evans, right, who was transcribing lyrics for them as they were doing songs. Like John, when they were doing I've Got a Feeling, was telling him some of the lines from his part so he could write it down.
You're seeing Mel Evans, and then they go, okay, now say this, and then we're actually seeing them writing this on the spot. And then, okay, then I can say this. Oh, no, you shouldn't say that because then that's repetitive. Like we're sitting them etch-a-sketch, paint by numbers in front of our faces.
Yeah, because there's even a moment where John tells him to write two different lyrics down and like put like a line between them because he's not sure which one's going to be better.
I'll make a decision later. Yeah.
Which is great because it almost like it gives them the opportunity to just create on the fly and force around and just be like, take this down, take that down, scribble this down for me, and they don't have to stop. And that just watching them, make these decisions on what the song is going to become is, like you said, it's just gold.
Like the one version of Revolution where John Lennon goes, you can count me out, and then you hear him go in because like I'm still undecided. I don't know what I might do later.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And now Mal Evans, I guess we could mention him a little bit. He was pretty consistent presence for the Beatles. I had a couple of notes for him where he started out as a roadie for them in 1963, and they must have liked him because they kept him around. He became their road manager. From what I've read, he played uncredited on a couple of Beatles albums, filling in on some instruments. And later on, he became a record producer. And I think the biggest hit I can think of that he did was Badfinger's No Matter What. So he was around for a long time. He was a very trusted, confidant and inner circle guy for the Beatles. And they must have needed those, with all the Beatlemania stuff going on. They needed people they could trust. And the fact that this guy seems to be now like a jack of all trades, he's bringing them their instruments, he's helping them with their lyrics. He seemed to be a really integral part of the group outside the group, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And definitely keep that inner circle close where it's like everybody wants a piece of us. So if we have somebody from our old days that we can trust and not have new people in, I can see them finding that very attractive.
Yeah, especially when you, I guess, as a group, you don't know what people's intentions are. At least you know this is a guy we've had around for a long time. And they did seem
Mm-hmm.
have some trust issues. I remember when we were talking about Brian Epstein passing on Montage in the first episode, they had a lot of fighting about who was going to be the new manager of the band.
And that's going to be a situation with them going
Yeah,
out.
yeah. So I guess yeah, having a guy like Evans around was a really important to them, and they'll have other people come that they've known for a long time. Right, and we'll get to that at another episode.
You want to talk about George having some suggestions of what they could do live as far as, hey, maybe we can pull out some old numbers.
Yeah, well, they did. They had a pretty big conversation about music. They were talking about Ray Charles and they were talking about Eric Clapton, and he was talking about how if we're going to do a live show, maybe we shouldn't just do new songs from this album we're making now. We could probably bring out some older songs, and they did a couple of older songs. At the end, they did "Every Little Thing," which is on Beatles, I think, in 1964.
Beatles for
Beatles for
Sale.
Sale, and
Which I really love that album. Like for, like it's the narrative is like, they get very interesting stuff once it's Sergeant Pepper on. But man, the early work, I really have an appreciation for it. But I really love Beatles for Sale.
Beatles for Sale is a great album. It sounds so collaborative, and they're all like
Mm-hmm.
singing. That's when you're really hearing that 3-part harmony that they do. And hearing them play it here after they released the White Album, it was kind of a trip to see them go back to old music because, like you said, they don't do live shows, so they're not playing songs together that they recorded. They're putting them in the can, and that's pretty much the end of it.
Yeah, and you would think like they were like, oh, I don't play that anymore. We're way beyond that. So I like the fact that they did. And George Harrison was also pitching the idea of I'm really good with my instrument and we can keep it going. Like even between songs, like music is steady happening. And I've witnessed that before. Like I saw the Roots play in Dallas, Texas, where they performed for like 3 hours and the music never stopped. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. So I see what he could say because he was saying like it could be, we could be really jazzy.
Right.
So between numbers, instead of taking a bow and doing banter, something's going on. Ringo's doing the drums, like you're playing on the piano, but there's no break. And I was like, oh, that would have been interesting if they would have pulled that off.
Because it seemed like when he was talking, he felt like I'm so much better now than I was when we toured. And he's learned so much in those years, and he wanted to kind of let all that flow out of him. And you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, between being friends with Clapton and going to America and being in India, his musical growth in those years was probably insane.
Just sitting there and observing and learning. This is just beautiful to listen to. He talked about how, like, back in the tavern days, they bumped into Ray Charles. They thought he was cool, and that's where they met Billy Preston. And he was telling them, like, this was new news. Like, hey, Ray Charles, he doesn't even play the organ anymore because Billy Preston is such a master at it. He just plays piano. Like, yeah. Right.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that that stuff sticks with him, and he thinks about that now when they're planning this live show.
Yeah. Because the status has changed. Like, okay, remember when we were meeting Ray Charles like in 63, 64? Okay, boom. Now it's 68, 69. The way we talk about him now is going to be different. Mm-hmm. Like there's some updates.
Mm-hmm. And now he's no longer a kid playing in a club in Hamburg. He's George Harrison, member of the Beatles. He's got a lot more clout and a lot more ability. And they end day 2 playing I'm So Tired, which they looked it. this looked to be a long day for them. A lot of stuff and a lot of conversations that, like you mentioned, underneath seem to have a little bit of tension, but nothing boiling over yet.
I love the fact that they're like still performing stuff from the White Album.
Right. Yeah.
And it just lets me know, like, it's not 10 years in between the two albums. It's a year and a half, too. They performed a lot. I guess some of that stuff was written in India. They had experiences together there. Ringo had some stomach issues, so he left early. But, yeah, the White Album's great, and why wouldn't they kind of fall back into that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, like you said earlier, it's music that they've never played live before.
So, yeah, we'll leave it here. 30 minutes to get back. Chris, final words about this one?
No, I guess my final words will be that if you want to reach out to us with any comments or corrections or any info that you have about the Beatles, you can reach us at 30getback@gmail.com and reach out to us if you have anything to talk about the Beatles, about Get Back, about what we discussed today. And I think that's about it. How about you, AJ? You got any credentials to throw out there?
Yeah, we want to hear from you, 30togetback@gmail.com. All the Beatle heads out there, Beatle bums, and give me some truth. So until next time, it's Chris and AJ. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.